I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darryl Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darryl Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darryl Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darryl Lee makes Christmas better. This is The Five of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. The series where I talk to notable people about 5 of their defining things. The way it works is my guests always choose a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. The reason I devised this series is I wanted to create a slightly different way to gain an insight into the real lives and thoughts of prominent people. John Eales is one of Australia's greatest sporting heroes. He is the country's most successful rugby captain and the highest scoring forward of any country in Test history. Not only did he win the World Cup on 2 occasions, he also has the distinction of having captained the Wallabies to more wins than losses against the All Blacks. Since hanging up his boots in 2001, John has forged a highly successful business career, founding 2 companies and authoring 2 books, alongside a multitude of director, journalist, consultant and ambassador roles. Now, so your film, you have chosen the comedy classic Blades of Glory. Tell me about it.
Well, look, I love comedies. I love, and I think particularly when they've got that element of real life about them, but they're sort of extended beyond the realms of possibilities, which makes them funny. Yeah. And that movie, Blades of Glory, is hilarious. Like, Will Ferrell is a very funny man. And the other actors in the movie. It's one of those ones that just as a family, our kids have probably watched it before they should have watched it from an age perspective.
I get that. Yeah.
And there's a couple of times you sort of cringe a little bit, but no, it is a very, very clever and funny film.
So the first 10 minutes of that film are as close to comedic perfection as you can get. And some of the lines where it's the... so I forget the name that Will Ferrell is playing, but he is so on the edge of committing, where he is the tsunami of swagger. He is the sex tornado. He hits the ice like a sack of plastic Euro porn. You go, this is sensational stuff. Yeah. And the music is Time to Say Goodbye.
Yeah.
So you add all that in, and the first 10 minutes, you're sort of almost pinned to the back of the sofa thinking, this is hilarious. I mean, I'm not sure it can sustain it the whole way through, but, wonderful.
Yeah, it's a typical story. There's a hero, there's a villain, and the same person is both at different stages, Will Ferrell, and others in the plot. It's a far-fetched plot, but it involves sport. Yeah, it's one of those movies that, it's the absurdity of it. Like growing up, I loved Monty Python.
Right.
Yeah, the absurdity of Monty Python. But there's something really clever about it. And it was the lines, it was the and that rags to riches story going with it.
Now, for your book, we're changing from comedy and we're going to semi-autobiographical non-fiction, is Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis. I remember reading that the month it came out. I was living in London. I wasn't actually working in the city as in finance, but I knew lots of people that were. And that, one of my sort of life-changing books.
I think it's one of those books. I love that genre, which is telling a great story, a real-life story, but almost in a fictional way, like in a fictional style. Like it's like really following just a story.
Yeah.
And it was written by a credible insider, Michael Lewis, who had spent time in the financial markets. So you got a real insider's view, and particularly Liar's Poker, he had worked in financial markets through that era. And I've always had an interest in finance and what makes it tick. And And he just gave a great insight into, really one of the crises in financial markets. So why it happened and all of that. It was recommended to me, and probably not right when it came out, but I was talking to someone and saying, look, I like that genre. And they said, well, you've got to read Liar's Poker. So I read that, and I think I've read all his books since then.
So he did Moneyball and The Big Short, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And Flash Boys and a number of other ones as well.
So it's a talent, a bit like Malcolm Gladwell, where you can take a subject that potentially, if you and I wrote about it, would be boring as all batshit. But and it's something that actually you wrote in. I read both your books again over the weekend, Learning from Legends, which was, you said, knowledge through entertainment. Now that is a part of what we're trying to do on this show. But so that's a real skill. If you can take something and you go, like The Big Short, the film, I'm watching this and I'm enjoying it, but also I'm actually sort of learning stuff.
Yeah, I really value the ability for someone, and I suppose it was having a father who was an educator. He was a school teacher and a school principal, and and teachers always teach, and whether you want them to or not, they're always teaching. And Dad was at his best, or worse sometimes, when he had us in the car in a contained space, and he was teaching. But I think that great teachers have this ability to entertain you as they're educating you.
Sure.
And so for me, when I've written, that's always been my mantra. I'm not sure if I always achieve it, but it's always been the goal. And also when speaking, you need to be able to grab people to get hooks that are really interesting. And Michael Lewis and Malcolm Gladwell do that so well. Yeah, they just are able to take you deep down. And I think there's some people, when they write and tell a story, they're telling a lot of the surface of a story, but they have the ability to dive deep and then go deeper and then go deeper to give those really particular insights and sometimes they're human insights, sometimes they might be financial insights or business insights, whatever they may be, but they're the real eye-openers and say, oh, wow, I get it.
Yeah. I like the way, you've seen the film Big Short?
Yeah, I have.
So I like when they're also... they're not afraid to show their underwear, if you know what I mean. So when they're explaining a quite a complex financial thing, they go, and here's Margot Robbie in a bath. Because we know your minds have sort of switched off. So Margot Robbie is going to be in a bath and she'll tell you. And you go, okay, that's fair enough. You're showing me what you're doing, but you have got my attention. And
it was a very unusual part that Steve Carell played for him.
Yeah.
Like much more serious.
That's right.
But it was a really good story, that one.
So I am. Is it Learning from Legends or? Yeah. So I read the business one second, which weirdly I liked better than the sport. I liked them both, but just quite intriguing.
Yeah, well, I liked it better too. And,
right. Okay.
I wrote them both and wrote the sports one first and then the business one. And really, for me, interviewing a lot of the sporting leaders was, in some ways, like they all had great stories and I loved doing it. But in some ways, it was almost looking back over a career that I had.
Yeah.
And so it was like, well, there's a lot of different ways to tell a similar story.
Yes.
And whereas when I was doing the business one, I was really just starting out in the formative stages of starting in business. Like I'd always done a little bit in business, but I was starting to get a lot more involved and starting to really unearth what I didn't know.
Yes.
And they say, I think in the progression of learning, one of the big steps is to know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's a really important step in learning, and you're starting to realise, oh, I don't know this, I don't know that, I don't know that. So when I was in the process of writing the business book and interviewing the 35 business leaders that I interviewed, I was able to ask them questions which gave me insight into the things I didn't know.
Yeah.
So it was really learning on the run. I really
You're getting free tuition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I felt it was a bit like almost doing an MBA on the run, because writing is and you know yourself, like it's a really an individual pursuit, and it takes discipline and time, and particularly when you're fitting it in amongst all the other things that you're doing. So for me, I wanted to make it doubly useful. I always wanted to write a book, and I thought, well, I'm going to write a book that's going to be really useful. I suppose, to put it simply, I followed my curiosity.
Yes.
And some of the curiosity was solving problems that I had at that particular time as well.
Well, it's interesting. So that book, I mean, I loved them both, but I actually sort of refer back to that book. And the line in it, and I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your arse, the line in it that I like the best, which I remember I'd say at least 6 times a year, is from the introduction. You say an Irish mate said to you, and you were about to retire, which is bloody wonderful life learning, which is always remember to love what you do, not what you did. And you go, wow. That's pretty. Yeah. I think for your life shows that you haven't. My version of that is I don't want the second half of my life to be a lame imitation of the first half. And so you to build a business career. People, they know who you are, they recognise you, but you can't go on, all the time about that amazing kick or whatever, because you go, well, mate, that was 15 years ago and we love you, but could you pay the mortgage? And you go, and how are you going to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, look, it was, I actually very fortuitously, and I suppose I've been in some respects like a bit of a bowerbird of interesting things and lessons, and that's probably Dad's influence. Always looking to be educated in some sense. And it was early in my career, and I was in a cab in Dublin, and the guy recognised me. He said, "Oh, look, mate," he said that line, "You've got to love what you do, not what you did."
Isn't that fabulous?
And for me, it just captured it for me. Life is about what you're doing now and where it's going to lead you in the future, not about the rearview mirror.
That's right. But you can be, what's that wonderful phrase where don't let your past dictate you, but let it be a very important part of who you are, but don't let it dictate you. And so that's fine. Wow. So your song was still in the States. We're going back to the 70s, to 1970. It is Bridge Over Troubled Water, written by Paul Simon, but sung by Art Garfunkel. One of the most covered songs of all time, done by 50 different artists, including Elvis Presley. Tell me why you have chosen that.
I think it was a period of my life, a lot of my mates down at Brothers Rugby Club, some of them, and there was a guy by the name of Rupert McCall. So Jason McCall is his proper name, but everyone knows him as Rupert, and he's a poet, and he's quite a genius. He was doing he was a lawyer by trade, but was writing a lot of poems, and we used to trade a lot of music. And I remember being at the World Cup in 1991. In those days, there was no such thing as sending things via email or anything like that. What arrived over at the World Cup and where we were staying was this cassette, and it was a copying of a whole lot of different songs.
Yeah,
he said, "Here's something to listen to while you're over there, through the World Cup." And on there was a lot of that genre. It was the Simon and Garfunkel genre, but it was a lot of other ones, and some I'd heard, and a lot that I hadn't heard. But it was in my Walkman as we listened to in those days, and Bridge Over Troubled Water was one of those songs. I remember listening to these songs on the way to the ground, and some songs, it doesn't really matter what they say, but it's the way they build, and that's a great song. A lot of people might think, well, better off listening to AC/DC on the way to a game. But for me, often it was those more introspective songs, and Bridge Over Troubled Water was one I loved listening to on the way to a game, because I found that that crescendo it built to was motivating.
Wow. Talk about how it builds. There's a couple of lines in the last verse where it says, your time has come to shine, all your dreams are on their way. And you go, in the context of the song and how it's been building, it just, I hadn't, until I went to read them knowing I was going to chat to you, I hadn't actually read the lyrics properly. I've always liked the song, but you go, well, it's actually incredibly insightful. And
well, it is, and it's also this journey of bringing someone along with you, and this person is saying, I'm going to look out for you, I'm going to be there for you, I'm going to take you along, and you're going to be better because I'm there. So it's, but your time has come to shine. What a wonderful, wonderful lyric. And you can just imagine a whole lot of things. It could be a father talking to their son, a guy talking to his future wife, whatever, or a wife talking to her husband. It doesn't matter. You can imagine it any way you like, but it is beautiful and it's powerful.
Have you seen the Elvis cover?
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I have heard him sing it.
Astonishing. So again, doing research for this, I they said it's one of the best covers, so I looked at it, and I sort of was prejudiced against it before I watched it. And you thought, he nailed it. And there's a story that Paul Simon went to see Elvis, because he put it in all his concerts, including the very last one that he did. So he loved the song like you love the song, Elvis, right? And Paul Simon went to see him, I think it was in 71. And his quote afterwards was, "That's it, we might as well all give up." Isn't that great? You go, he's done it better than I, than I do it type thing. So but have your work copied by, Aretha Franklin, Elvis Presley, you know that you've written something that will last forever. That, in 50 years' time, people will still be listening to Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Well, I have heard the story that, and there's along similar lines, and there was the 9 Inch Nails song "Hurt,"
right,
and which was covered by Johnny Cash, who, you got to love Johnny Cash's voice and his power. And the name of the lead singer escapes me, but the guy from 9 Inch Nails said after he heard Johnny Cash singing, he said, "That's no longer our song."
Yeah,
that is his song, and he is unbelievable doing that song. And I think music's always been really important for me. I can't do it, I can't sing, but I sing at home and pester everyone. But I've always loved it and loved a great lyric, and people who can put a tune and a lyric together. I have great respect for.
This is The Five of My Life. More in a moment with John Eales. This is The Five of My Life with Nigel Marsh. So your place, I can't wait to hear about this, because you've chosen Jean-Pierre Rives' restaurant in Paris. Now, Jean-Pierre Rives, you wouldn't have known this, but he is one of my heroes. That was my sort of era. What was it, 75 to 84, he would be playing. The Asterix, or whatever they called, the golden helmet, or whatever they called, in the Blonde Destroyer. Yeah. And he, a bit like what we were talking about love what you do, not what you did. He is a cult figure in Paris, and rightly so, because he's got two halves of his life, each of which would do for most men to be their entire legacy. You go, I was a very, very famous rugby player, like you, one of the few men that's walking this earth that's captained his nation to a victory over the All Blacks on New Zealand soil. That will sort of do. Or I am a world famous sculptor. And you go, but it's the same bloke. Yeah. Anyway, so you've chosen his restaurant in Paris as your favourite place. Tell me about it.
Yeah, look, it's hard to pick a favourite place, isn't it? Because there's so many. But I chose that because I do love, food and wine. And Jean-Pierre doesn't drink, but he had some good wine in his restaurant. But I don't think he has that restaurant any longer.
Right.
But it was... it was a place I got to know him over the years. So I remember sitting at home one time. It was after the 95 World Cup in South Africa, which was a disappointing result for us. We got knocked out in the quarterfinals. I was back home and playing just local, for club, for brothers, through, the rest of the season. And I get a call at home one night, and he says, "Oh, John, it's Jean-Pierre Rives here." And I say, "Oh, yeah, rubbish. Yeah. Who is this?" And he said, No, it is. It's Jean-Pierre Rives." And so I thought, oh, wow. And then he invited me to come and play for the French Barbarians. And
right.
I was like you, I love watching Jean-Pierre Rives as a kid. And Sunday nights I used to have World of Rugby, or you watch some of the Five Nations highlights and things like that. So, and that was always great, and you'd love watching the games. And Jean-Pierre Rives was someone who grabbed my attention through those years. And then having him on the phone, then going over and meeting him and staying at his place before we went down to Toulon and played the All Blacks for the French Barbarians. And when you get welcomed into the French Barbarians, it's like a club for life. It's not just a one-off game. And they're such a great group of people. There's a great fraternity. And really, I was very fortunate to have a lot of great experiences in rugby. That is right up there with the top. Not necessarily playing the game, but just being involved with that fraternity of the French Barbarians. And one time when I was over there, Jean-Pierre said, "Oh, look, come and have dinner at our restaurant." And so we went there and went there a number of times over the years. And look, the food was fantastic, but it was more the company. And I suppose, as I said earlier, it is more about that. There's no time greater than when you're with family and friends and you're able to enjoy great wine with great food. Yeah, I think if you can enjoy that. And they don't have to be expensive wine or food either, but it's just the great food, wine and company. Life doesn't get much better. Yeah, breaking bread with another human soul and talking. That's what it's sort of about. Do you own a Jean-Pierre Rives sculpture? I actually do. You bastard! Really? Is it one of those big ones, or? It's big enough. It'd be a hard one to. So in the garden steal. Or in the house? It's in the garden. Fantastic. Yeah. And did he give it to you, or did you purchase it? No, look, he did, because he did an exhibition in Sydney, and he invited me to open it. which was a great honour. Like, you can imagine, like as a kid, you don't think you're going to meet these people, let alone you end up in some form being their peers. And I say that with a great deal of modesty and some reservation. And being invited to open that thing. And then he said, look, I want you to have one of the sculptures. And we chose one and have it in the house. It's not an easy thing to move around.
Is it wrought iron, bent into shape?
Yes, it is. Almost like these sleepers that are bent, and it's really great. And there was a moment with John Pierre Reeves. It's interesting, and I used to have my own routine before every Test match, and this one was the World. And when we sang the national anthem, I'd always pick a face in the crowd, and I'd pick an Australian. And you'd see an Australian jersey or someone supporting Australia might have a scarf on, and they would never know it, but I would sing the anthem with them because for me, one of the things that lit my fire as far as rugby was concerned was seeing the Australian team sing the national anthem before a Test and thinking, how good would it be to be out there in the jersey about to play a Test, sing the national anthem. And so it's developed this routine for myself where before a Test match, I'd pick this face in the crowd and I'd pretend I'd imagine myself in their shoes, how much they would want to be in my shoes, and sort of charge me with that extra bit of responsibility as I sang the anthem. But watching the World Cup quarterfinal in 1999 in Cardiff, we were playing against the Welsh, and Jean-Pierre was in the crowd, and you could see him. You can pick him a mile away. He's with some other French barbarian folk, and they had their French barbarian blazers on, and I saw him up there in the crowd, and during the anthem, I sang the anthem looking at him, and I'm not sure he sang the national anthem, but he could see that I was looking at him and acknowledged, and I think I just nodded or acknowledged back. But it was a special moment. He's a great guy and a really interesting guy on so many different levels, and to think if you can admire someone for something, it's that they have a great passion, they follow their passion and they exhaust their passion. And he did that with rugby, and he's in the process of doing that with art.
What a great relationship. I think also I'm friends with a sculptor in Sydney who's had quite an impact on me, where he talks about if you make something that's got inner beauty and truth, it lasts forever. Yeah, and people's different interpretations of it, that doesn't matter. If it's true and real, and so much in modern life is superficial, vacuous bollocks, that piece that you've got, it was made by him. It's real. It's not a marketing exercise. It's not for show. And so when you look at that, it's just, I think there's something really beautiful and meaningful in an object that's got that authenticity about it.
Yeah, look, I agree. And I remember speaking with Ken Doan when I interviewed him for the Business Leaders book, and he was talking about art, and he said, at the end of the day, you paint something, and it might have an exhibition, and 100 people might walk past it and think it's the biggest load of old crap they've ever seen. Yeah. But then one person will walk past and look at it, and it'll stop them. They may not buy it, but you can see it's grabbed them, and they're taking something out of it. He said, as an artist, I'm successful.
Yes.
Yeah, and that means, and it's interesting to look at that because in some people's language, he's had 100 failures for one success, but not in his language. He's had that one success. And that resilience, I think, the artists can be soft and gentle personalities in some respects and deep and introspective, but they've got to have a bravery to do what they do, because it is confronting when you put your work out there, whether it be something you write or a song you sing or something you've painted or created. And to put it out there for people to criticise and think it's a load of old crap, I think business people and others need to understand how to harden up a little bit sometimes and not take things as personally all the time.
There's a quote from Sean Penn. I'm not saying he's a philosopher, but the actor Sean Penn, it's from a long interview he gave for Rolling Stone, and it was, if you do what I do, you've got to constantly live with the flat on your face thing. And you go, isn't that brilliant? You go, so I will. There's no way, a bit like being an international sports person, but there is no way I'm going to have a career and not do something where I'm going to fall flat on my face. So the only way I can not have the flat on my face is just sit in my bedroom and never leave it. So then that's actually quite liberating. You go, so there will be times when I do a painting or a show or write a book and people go, that's crap. And especially if you're putting yourself in it. It's one thing if you're writing romantic, fiction, and people say, well, that book was crap, John. You go, well, it was right. But if it's about you, I'm saying, actually, the book was crap and you're crap. While I'm at it, can I just tell you what I think about you?
Yeah.
So to actually just, live with passion and authenticity and go, and you can't please all the people all the time, and you're not always going to be the World Cup champion, and it makes it better when you are, that you aren't always. And which brings me to your possession, which I can't wait to hear about. And like most of the people that come on the Five of My Life, is you've chosen something that has no monetary value. So I'm really glad that people don't come on and say my Ferrari or my Aston Martin or my yacht. They say the picture of my granny wearing a Wallaby shirt.
Yeah.
So tell me about it.
So my grandmother, she's Italian, and look, she passed away in 2000, but she came to Australia when she was 21 years old in 1924 and was a huge influence on my life. Mum and Dad got married and they set up their own house. Within 6 months, my grandmother and grandfather had moved in with them. Right. So Dad had all his married life with his parents-in-law living in the house. But he was a very patient guy, but they were great people. Yeah. And Nono and Nonna, as we called them, but Nono passed away when I was he was about 10 or plus years older than my grandmother, and he was in Australia and went back to find a wife.
Right.
Basically, because he couldn't find a wife in Australia, so went back, picked up my grandmother. Within 3 weeks they're married. Within 6 weeks she's on a boat on the way to Australia.
Right.
So she was 21 years of age in 1924. She died a week short of her 97th birthday. Went back to Italy once in all that time.
Wow.
And basically lived with us from before I was born. So we were very close.
So in the same house as you? Wow, okay.
Yeah. And so we had a very close relationship. It was almost like having two mums to a large degree. And like I was incredibly fortunate that, to have such, love in the house.
Yeah.
And she had a great work ethic. She had a great soul. And she had a great sense of humour a lot of the time as well. And I would often try, and she was less than 5 foot tall,
right,
which is in stark contrast to myself. But I would often try to get her to put on one of my Wallaby jerseys. I wanted to get a photo and send it to a couple of people, and she refused to. She never would.
Right.
She loved the fact I was playing for Australia. She wouldn't have cared in what it was.
Yeah.
She had no idea what rugby was. I don't think she ever watched a game. She couldn't watch games. She'd get too nervous.
When are you going to get a proper job, John?
Yeah, exactly. And in her eyes, the only proper job was being a doctor as well, or a lawyer. Maybe those two traditional jobs. But so I never got to put this jersey on. But then one Sunday morning, she came home from mass, and whatever reason, I said, "No, I'm going to." I want you to put the jersey on. And she said, no. And I said, no, I do. And for whatever reason, this one day was the only time she ever weakened. And so I thought, I'm going to keep going here. So I got the jersey on her. She was doing her hair, getting it all right. I got the jersey on her. I got my shorts on her, and the jersey's coming through the bottom of the shorts. And I got my socks on her. And so I got her out in the front yard. I thought, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. And in those days, you had to then find a camera and have film on it. And there was no such thing as camera in your phone. And got her out into the front yard and took a series of photos, including some where she's holding a footy, others where she's holding a 4X.
Oh, gorgeous.
Who were the sponsors at the time. So it's a series of photos that sits on my desk at home. And,
right. So one of those framed ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, she met a lot of my teammates over the years, and everyone loved her. And she died the week before we played South Africa in 2000, and it was probably now Australia and South Africa play for the Mandela Plate. I think it was the first time that was played for in a test in Melbourne. And she died early in the week, so I didn't go down straight away, and stayed up for a couple of days just with the family, and then went down and I remember going out to play that game, and then I saw before the game all my teammates were putting the black armbands on.
Yeah.
And George Gregan was the vice captain. He said, "Mate, this is for Nonna." And look, I mean, in all the time that I was playing, I'd say that would have been one of the most emotional moments for me in a Wallaby jersey, and it's, just how your teammates, she was so important. It was her time, like almost 97.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're sad, but it's more about the celebration of her life. But it's this momentous occasion of someone really important to you moving on, passing away. And the acknowledgement of that from my teammates was something I'll never forget.
What a lovely story. When I look around my house at the difference in how people of our generation treat photos and framed photos than to our kids. So there, I look back to my parents where certain photos make it into the silver frame.
Yeah.
And then they become hugely disproportionate in your view of your great-grandfather that you never met, because the one photo that you've seen of him is him wearing a naval uniform.
Yeah.
Right? But that might have no genuine representation of his character. But that's what I see every day of my 18 years that I'm growing up and whatever else. So I quite like the process of honouring an image. So I think, personally, frames are going to come back in. I don't want 6,000 photos on my bloody iPhone. I want a few that really mean... I've got a picture of my wife and my kids at a certain time where they were all at school, and it's just a snapshot in time, and you go, frame it. And mate, I have to say, I wish that I could talk to you for, 3 more hours, because you are a dead set inspiration. You really are, not just on the sporting field, but just in life generally. You have one more question that you have to answer, which is, who should I get on 5 of My Life next?
Oh, it's very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. If you could go international,
yes, most definitely.
Like, I reckon that getting someone like a Paul Simon, or a Michael Stipe from lead singer of REM, I'd love to, really understand how you write a song.
Yeah.
I know it's different. Like, sometimes the lyrics will come, sometimes the music comes, sometimes they come at the same time. Yeah, but understanding that how, and say in Paul Simon's case, how a guy who was probably early 20s for a lot of those great songs that he wrote, how he could have so much insight into human nature at such a young age, and where it's come from, and where it's whether he's followed a lot of his own thoughts and ideas all his life.
John Eales, thank you so much for coming on to 5 of My Life.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Nigel.
The 5 of My Life was presented by me, Nigel Marsh. Producer, Alex Mitchell. Sound production and theme music by Darcy Thompson and Matt Nicholish.